Welcome back to room 301. Thank you all for joining us. I am joined by two of my colleagues today. So one of those is Lewis Hall, one of those is Peter Bingham. So Lewis, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, cool. So, I'm a paid media guy. I've been working agency side now for about 4 or so years. Started dabbling in pretty much everything when I first started agency, and then sort of took to paid as the route for me. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool, thank you. And Pete?
So I've been at the Digital Maze and one of the brands that they own, Boom, for coming up to 10 years now. Started as, yeah, I know, wow.
Wow.
Started as a designer, content creator, and slowly sort of steadily worked my way through quite a lot of the disciplines in digital marketing to the position I am in now, which is growth marketing lead. So I look after our various brands, FrogSpark, Boom, and obviously the Digital Maze, etc., their marketing, social media, lead generation, running the podcasts and events and whatnot. So yeah, I think that's me in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Thank you both. So today we're going to be talking about digital marketing for startups and new businesses specifically. So anybody who's just started a business or is in the first couple of years, business owners, or even part of the marketing function of those sorts of businesses, I think this will be perfect for you. There's lots of takeaways we hope to give you on this podcast. So yeah, I'm going to run through some questions. At the end of the podcast, we have our Room 301 challenge, which is well worth sticking around for. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the first question, which is, what would you say are some of the key challenges startups and small businesses face in digital marketing and comparing to an established business? Lewis, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think the first thing really that stands out to me is, and this can go any industry, right? I'm going to use like gym clothing brands as an example because I think Gymshark's always like a comparison one. But new businesses in that field, they look up to Gymshark and go, okay, this is this massive powerhouse. How are they doing their marketing? How have they positioned themselves? But like the problem they have versus Gymshark is Gymshark's been around for I don't know how, like over 10 years. It's so established. The way they position themselves is very brand orientated. It's kind of like Nike and Adidas, where they're not really looking for like direct response necessarily. It's more eyes, brand visibility, and that's pretty much how their marketing for the most part is. Whereas these small businesses, they can't really approach it the same way because if they're brand new, I mean, they wouldn't be known at all. And yeah, they just can't position themselves as a brand awareness focus because they haven't got the cash flow, they haven't got the cash to sustain that, and also they really need to focus on direct response and like getting sales through the door, new customer acquisition, and things like that. I use the Gymshark example, but again, I feel like it could be applied to like any industry. To be fair, but I feel like that's probably like the biggest bottleneck I see comparing like a new startup to an established brand. I don't know what you guys think.
No, I think
You've got a
that's it, isn't it?
different take, or
you've got your longevity on the side of the big business, and when we talk about digital marketing, you've got to think these domains could have been around for 20 odd years, especially with some of the bigger businesses. So they've got a more established business. They've got time on their side, haven't they? So the domain authority and their backlink profile, if you want to get technical, is going to be far more advanced. They'll have put so much more work into it, and you're starting from nothing. You are battling against it, time effectively. So they've already spent all of that time and effort getting to that stage, and their website authority is already at a stage where you want to be in, as soon as possible, which is next to impossible. You look at what Google is doing at the moment. It's certainly, there's been quite a lot of chatter in the SEO community on social and whatnot about Google favoring big business. So you look at, you search for almost anything today, and you see the same names coming up time and time again for articles. You've got your Forbes coming up for almost anything, and it was the subject of quite a well-read article. Small businesses, real humans writing reviews and whatnot, and they're seeing their space in the SERPs, wiped out by these bigger names doing something similar, but using AI or basically, paid placement for these things. So you are fighting against a bigger machine and bigger corporations who have been doing it a long time, and the trust and authority that these can command in the SERPs. So yeah, that but a bit more technical. Yeah.
No, it's interesting.
I feel like as well, like these big businesses, like obviously they've been around for so many years, they know what works for them, and they've obviously found like an angle on the market that has helped them scale to whatever point they're at. Whereas like the startups and new businesses, if they're looking at digital marketing, there is so much like flashing lights everywhere you look. LinkedIn, YouTube, any social media about digital marketing, how to do this, how to do that, this hack, this strategy. And I feel like sometimes these companies or these small businesses just get overwhelmed with what to do, when to do it, how to execute something as well. A lot of these like hacks and things are often like lead magnets, right? For certain things or courses or whatever. But yeah, I think they often get like
The
blinded.
temptation
really
is to try and compete on every level,
stuff.
and it's not something that you can do. You really have to think about specializing as soon as possible if you're not doing it already, and sort of try and grow from that point of view, as opposed to try and do everything that the bigger businesses have budget, resources, and like I say, longevity behind them on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the budget one's good because it's like they have a lot of testing ability. They can try things, and if it doesn't work, they can just sort of cross it off the box and move on to the next thing. Whereas if a small business was to try that, like that could just cripple them and lose a lot of the cash, and that could be really like devastating on that front as well.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. So with all that in mind, then, what advantages does a small business have over a bigger business?
Well, I mean, there are a few. They obviously, you are facing the mountain and all the resources and brands these brands have. But I think one of the things that I've written a blog. I've actually written a blog post about this quite recently, which we'll link to. I'm sure in the article that accompanies the podcast. But something that I noticed was that a lot of the sort of startups and smaller business can really lean into their authenticity and their sort of human side, and in a way that the big brands like to do, but have to spend a lot of money and resources doing, and it does sometimes, but it doesn't often come across as authentic. So you can do certain things as a smaller startup, new business that big business just wouldn't even consider, just because of the it would either be perceived as inauthentic or it would cost a lot of money in order to achieve. There's things like just showing more of your human side, so getting on social media and just being a point of contact, a familiar face that you just wouldn't get with a bigger business. You don't see Jeff Bezos answering Amazon queries or talking directly to customers online, and you wouldn't expect it. Similarly, if you've got a problem or something with a big business, you wouldn't expect to be able to get to the head honcho and say, I've got a problem here and, I need it fixing, whatever. Whereas with smaller businesses, you can almost leverage that authenticity and access to those sort of key people in the business. And that's something you can really lean into either on social or, just being more contactable or responding to reviews and to comments and listening to feedback more. You can just be more authentic and more genuine with your responses. And I think that's something that big businesses just can't do after a certain point. It just becomes prohibitive to them.
Yeah, I think it kind of feeds into what you said, really. I think
Yeah.
there's too much sign off in a big business. It goes very corporate, very structured. You have to go to this person who signs off to this person and it's very hard to launch something, for example. Whereas a small business can pivot so fast. Every week they can pivot, they can change angle, they can be reactive in the market as well, which I do think is a massive thing. For example, things like TikTok trends, they come and go. If you're a small business and you're sort of in a good niche with with like these TikTok trends and you can fit into that, you can just smash that very, very quickly. Within a couple of weeks, the trend's there. Whereas a big business might have so much sign off by the time you've come around to going, okay, we can launch this video, it's gone. This trend's done. And people have moved on to the next thing. So I think on that aspect as well, on that front, it's pretty important to be able to be very agile and pivot the
Yeah, I
strategy.
think as well. You sort of said
Yeah.
just developing that niche, knowing where you can sort of double down on what you know, and something that you can deliver better than your competitors, especially big competitors, is good. I mean, going back to Amazon again, don't forget they started with books, didn't they? And they doubled down on that, and they became the place to buy books, and then they expanded into this behemoth of whatever they are now. But again, I think it's important to not just put all your eggs in one basket. Whilst it is important to specialize and niche, it's important that you don't just have some sort of one avenue for like visibility and leads and whatever. So you can't just rely on SEO. You can't just rely on social media. You sort of have to spread yourself a little bit thinner and try out a few of the things. And that agility definitely plays into that. That's something that you definitely pursue as a smaller business. Omnichannel,
Yeah, the favorite word at the minute is omnichannel, right? Omnichannel everything.
You touched on it earlier, Lewis, about the need for experimentation. I mean, first of all, why is experimentation important? And two, again, we've touched on it. The lack of budget that a small business might see I suppose, it can make experimentation difficult, can't it? Because you need sufficient budget to fail with, so to speak. How do you balance sort of using proven strategies and experimentation with a limited budget? And again, why is it so important to experiment in your marketing?
Would you be talking about a brand new business that's never really done any marketing, or a business that's still small but they've found some success with certain channels and they want to test something different or go omni-channel?
Yeah. Well, I think the typical listener of this podcast will be somewhat established, 6 to 12 months, got some proven strategies under their belt, and I think if we focus on them, I think we'll get a much well-rounded answer.
Yeah, I think. Well, I'm going to sort of go down the paid ad front, I suppose. So if you're having success with Google Ads, and for example, you're seeing great growth, but it's not as rapid as you want, allocating sort of 15 to 20% of a marketing budget, in my personal opinion, to testing new ideas, testing new channels, testing creative, testing all these different things is probably a good balance of you're still growing, you're still retaining customers, you're still finding new customers and business, but you have freed up a little bit of budget to test and develop new channels, grow omni-channel. And for example, it could even be organic social. It's really, really a big thing that a lot of small businesses don't necessarily take advantage of, as probably like they have it probably a better opportunity on paid social, organic, simply because they haven't got all the sign off required to launch all these videos, try different angles and things like that. I'd say really like 15-20% of a marketing budget to testing new things is quite reasonable. And like I said, you're still growing. Okay, you might not have all of the 100% budget going towards one channel that works, but I'll use the Google Ads. What happens if Google Ads breaks for some reason? Issues, accounts go down, account suspensions, products get disapproved. These things happen. And well, if you've got all your eggs in that one basket, like that's it for a bit, right? you've kind of lost all new growth. So I do think it's really important to diversify. And as well, I guess a flip side, a more recent thing with Facebook, a lot of people are struggling with Facebook at the minute. Meta ads in 2024 have been up and down, lacking in consistency. So all of these brands that only spend on Facebook, they should have probably tested a bit of TikTok. That's a really, really popular trend at the moment. Maybe invest in Google Ads, a bit of brand growth there as well. Just sort of build a foundation for yourself on a few different platforms. Once you've found something that works, in my opinion, is really, really important.
No, I agree with that totally. Any thoughts from you, Pete,
absolutely
on
agree
that?
with everything that's been said, to be honest. I think, you want to make sure that you are trying to carve out 15-20% on experimentation. And I think actually, Lewis touched on it as well. I think it's actually a lot easier for smaller businesses to experiment because they don't really have the weight of a brand behind them. So it's not just the red tape. It's you have to do this in a certain way when you're a big brand. You have to follow the brand guidelines. This is our tone of voice. This is our spokesperson. These are the contracts we have in place, and this is how we have to deliver it. Whereas you can be a bit more loose and a bit more, well, let's try this out. It doesn't work. I mean, nobody's going to really remember us unless it goes well. So I think you can have a lot more fun, which helps with experimentation. You can be a bit more creative, and I think that you can find the right brand voice. So I think that's important. And I also think you can start small with experimentation. You don't need to jump into anything big. I wouldn't say start jumping into massive digital PR campaigns or anything. But there's things like simple things like A/B testing and trying out a small platform on a small scale, just seeing where the market trend is and just having a little go, dipping your toe. And like I say, if it doesn't work, if there's a massive car crash like Apple's recent iPad launch where they crushed a load of creative instruments and things like that, nobody's going to notice if you're small. So you can be a bit freer to try new things out. So I would say if you can afford it, try and reserve that sort of 20% marketing budget, but start small and really try and find your brand voice and the things that works within your capacity and budgets. If you can deliver things within your team without having to outsource them, whatever, and you find you may have people within your team that become brilliant spokesperson for your team, or that creative resource that you can deliver in house. It's just about trying things out and not being scared to fail. No one will see. No one will see if you do. And you can't really carve out a niche unless you try some experimentation. You can't find that specialism without a bit of experimentation, because you can't just follow the herd. You have to try something different if you want to succeed.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Sorry. Another quick point to add to that as well. I think smaller businesses have. You don't necessarily need to invest a huge amount into like trying different things, because to move the needle, I guess it's a small. You only need to see a small difference to go, okay, this is something worth investing more in. Whereas these massive businesses, because they generate huge amount of revenue from so many different channels, it's so hard to keep track of where things come from, where sales or leads have come from. You don't actually know if these tests that you're doing necessarily have resulted in a positive outcome. Whereas as a smaller business, you kind of know where you're getting your current lead flow from, your sales from. Is it organic? Is it social? Is it paid? And then from that point, if you test something new and you see an uptick in revenue, in sales, and lead flow, then you can kind of point that to the direction of, okay, this test was a positive thing. Let's like dissect this a bit more and hopefully invest more into this, grow this new test out and experiment out. And I think that's another way to sort of, another advantage really.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one thing I see as well is businesses don't spend enough time in the experiment either. So they sort of disregard it too quickly. Maybe they haven't got somebody involved who's an expert in that field, therefore they don't have the right level of data, or it's just not worked because it's not been implemented correctly. Yeah. So I think if you are going to experiment, I think my opinion is at least try and employ somebody who is clued up in that area to perform that test for you, to make sure you're getting the output, an accurate output, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree. To be honest, that's a really good point. I think a lot of the time these tests happen, but it's not a 100% go at the test. It's like, oh yeah, whatever, we'll throw 10% effort at this test. A week later, it's like, oh, we've seen nothing. That's it. Cut it. Like, I agree. That's a really good point.
Never try it again. Yeah. I mean, we're a full service agency, so I often speak to people who want SEO or they want PPC, and they'll tell me, oh, we tried that, it didn't work. It's like, well, A, when did you try it? I said, 7 years ago. And B, how long did you try it for? Oh, we tried SEO for 2 weeks and it didn't work. It's like, well, okay. Who did it for you? Oh, Susan from accounts.
Leave Susan out of it.
So yeah, I think if you're going to do it, try and do it properly. I know that incurs costs, and we're talking about small business today, but yeah, it's important that you try and do it properly. So I suppose lack of experimentation could be one of the biggest mistakes we see small businesses make from a marketing perspective. Are there any other mistakes that you sort of constantly see?
To be honest, I think I said most things really that I personally feel like is a big front on a marketing um, area. But yeah, I don't know if you've got anything else,
Sort of
Pete, to
mistakes. I
add
think
or
one of them probably is, like we have already covered, it is trying to do too much and not specializing, trying to copy what the big boys are doing. Another one is trying to grow too soon, or grow your processes, your internal processes or systems, at a pace that just doesn't match growth. So it might be hiring team members for a vanity project or something, or investing a tool or process that is just maybe too advanced or too costly or whatever at that stage. And I think a lot of that comes down to maybe hiring the right people early enough. And we talked about this just a second ago, where you need to make sure you've got the experts working on certain things, experiments and whatever, and sort of, and maybe knowing when to outsource to an agency or creative or whatever. And it is a very fine line, especially when you've got smaller budgets, of knowing um, when it's time to grow, and when to invest in that new process, or whether you'll just do that and then it'll just absolutely, it's just, we're just too early, or maybe even too late. It's just that knowing when to grow and when is too soon is something. And that can be also for strategies and things like that. It's like, when is it a good time to start something like digital PR? If you're up against websites that have thousands of millions of backlinks, it can be very tempting to think, well, we need some backlinks. How can you approach that on a level that is sustainable and achievable with your team, instead of going, well, they employed this massive agency or whatever, and they've suggested that we spend 10 grand a month on digital PR or whatever. It's like, that's not going to be sustainable. But there are approaches, there are strategies, there are tactics that you can use. So I think it's just that knowing at what pace to roll things out, to sort of accompany growth at the right pace is a mistake that I think we've seen a few times along the way. Certainly I have.
yeah, I think the hiring point is really key. Like, a lot of people might go, okay, we need this person in house, this person in house, this person in house, and at that point, you've spent all of your cash reserves on just hires, where really, like you said, you could have looked at freelance, you could have looked at agencies for like a growth point of view, to take a lot of the stuff under their wing. Yeah, good point.
Cool, makes sense. I mean, something that myself and you'll speak about a lot, particularly the wider PPC team, is scaling and scaling budgets. Are there any sort of triggers that you look for? And this is particularly in regards to sort of paid ads, so Google Ads, Meta ads, Instagram, Facebook, so on and so forth. Are there any sort of triggers that you look for that, particularly small business owners, they are hesitant to invest more in marketing, even if it's working? It's sort of additional overhead is quite a scary thing for a small business owner. So, are there any triggers that you look for that allow a business owner to feel more comfortable in increasing their budget and whatnot?
Yeah, I think I mean a few things are back end stuff. Like, you can sit in platform and you can look at the in platform numbers, but they're not necessarily 100% accurate. For example, Facebook ads, you can look in platform, you'll see XYZ sales, but if you look in the back end of your Shopify account, you might see half that or double that. So, not being so focused on in platform metrics, obviously that's an important factor, but also looking at the wider business view. How have things looked over the like trend in 30 days or 90 days? Are we seeing things? And I think really with like product based businesses, it's new customers. Like, you could have a sustained amount of revenue, but if all of that's returning customers, technically the business isn't growing. At some point, realistically, the business is slowly bleeding out if you're not getting any new customers. So the trends I look for is a slow uptick in new customer acquisition from a product based business front. If that's slowly trending up, and it might not necessarily just from your channel. Your channel could be one factor in a massive cycle of the customer journey. And if that's slowly trending up, in platform metrics look quite good as well. Obviously, that's still important. Slowly start upticking budget, and I don't mean double it overnight, right? That's ludicrous. But just set yourself tests, set yourself hypotheses. I think hypotheses are really important. So, okay, for the next 3 months or the next quarter, we're going to increase budget by 20%. how does that look versus previous quarter? Are we still trending upwards in the right direction? And if new customers are trending up and you're still sustaining what your returning customers are, then that is business growth in a nutshell. And that's the driving force really to start increasing spend again.
And how scalable is it from a spend point of view in relation to paid ads? So if you're putting £1,000 in and you're getting a 3 times return on ad spend, if I doubled it, would I still get a 3 times? Is it scalable?
Well, I mean,
He wants an
it really
answer.
depends on niche, right? And product. I think, yeah, yeah. Well, it's an answer that works, I suppose. No, I think, yeah, if you're, it's all product cost. It's how much we'll use this as, again, it's like a product based business, right? It's like how much is it costing you to fulfill the product. A lot of small businesses don't actually know these numbers. I think that's one problem with them. So, if you ask a company what's break even ROAS, or how much do we need to make just to break even, they won't be able to tell you the answer. Or if they tell you the product cost, do they also know the shipping fees, the margins, the website hosting costs, all the apps on their website, all the softwares they use, the payment processing fees, things like that? It's like that's always missed. So yeah, really knowing like true numbers about cogs and how much your product costs after shipping, after tax, after VAT, everything, so you can keep a good like flow of cash, and what your cash flow is looking like. That's super important. But yeah, I think it like small spends like £1,000, like if you could double that at 3x ROAS and probably maintain a 3x ROAS, right? But if you're talking about scaling it to 100,000, then no, probably not. You going to
Ruined
see
it the
that.
last minute.
Well, you pull a few fingers about be able to, right? But no,
That was a dream,
yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
If we could all do that, then we'd all be very wealthy, I suppose, wouldn't we?
Yeah, yeah, there wouldn't be any ups and downs. Just be a straight rocket
That's it.
up. That'd be smooth sailing. But
Again, something else I see from regularly talking to different business owners from to be fair, businesses from all different shapes and sizes is, they start a new product or they start a new business and they kind of just think, right, I'm going to employ an agency to do marketing. Very, very loose brief. Who's your target market, so on and so forth. It leads me down this path of, are there prerequisites before you market? What are the things that should be done before you even start investing in your marketing? Because we've been in this situation loads of times as an agency where person creates business and just says, go and get sales, but actually we need a lot more information, and there's an argument there to say that information shouldn't be gotten or provided by us unless we're employed to do it, of course. So what are the prerequisites? What are the exercises that you would go through before you even put a penny into marketing to understand you're making the most of your marketing spend once you start doing that?
do you want to go first, Pete? I've got a few things, but yeah, I mean, I'll
obviously
sort of let
you
you take
need
the
to know
reins
your
on this one.
market, and you would hope that you would if you've sort of invested the time or whatever and have approached an agency. And I think that's something that we've already touched on here, is about knowing the capacity of your team and understanding your audience. For example, we've just talked about metrics and whatnot, and knowing what to look for and being a bit clouded by the scope of that sort of thing. So for me, it would be about knowing exactly what your business goals are and what you want to achieve, and understanding. I mean, metrics is, it's just right, we've achieved that, let's move on. It's more about, I'd say KPIs are probably a good tactic to use, because you've got a bunch of quantifiable measures of performance over time. And I think just sort of having that and coming to an agency and saying, this is what we're hoping to achieve, and whether the agency agree with you and whatever, it is something else. But I think a specific objective, like we want to increase leads by 20% this quarter, or increase subscribers to a newsletter by 2,000, or whatever it is. I think KPIs are good because they have a bite-sized approach to measuring success. And I think if you can provide your agency or your marketing team with these sort of like I said, bite-size goals. If we pass the criteria for this, it will lead to this, and I think that almost makes it a little less, vacuous, like the giant cloud over your head, and just provides more focus. I think that's something I would definitely like to sort of see from a client. Obviously, I've not done a lot of client-facing stuff for a while now because I'm internal, but definitely having that sort of clear set of goals and that bite-sized approach to, if we can achieve this, then we'll achieve that. And knowing what the macro goals are, as well as the larger ones, is definitely something that I think is a good approach.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the KPI question or point is super, super key. A lot of the time, well, I guess we've been on both sides of the coin. One, potentially where people have come to an agency too early, and others where they've come to an agency and seen, well, I couldn't fulfill the orders quick enough because I grew them that quick. But it's
Who's talking about this?
yeah, so there's two sides, but I feel like, if you, again, it goes back to numbers. Like, if you can come to an agency with KPIs that are realistic, that you have actually got facts behind why those KPIs are set in place, and you've not just plugged them from thin air, it's potentially a good time to look at an agency for help. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know these numbers, the agency doesn't know how to help. The agency doesn't know where we are and where we need to get to. It's so difficult to work that out. So I think really it goes down to numbers, and another point really as well is, do you have the capability to help the agency for what you've essentially hired them to do? I think sometimes small businesses go, okay, we've seen a bit of growth. Okay, we're going to hire an agency now. Pay the agency to do X, Y, Z, but the agency can't fulfill that service necessarily because they haven't got X, they haven't got Y, they haven't got KPIs, they haven't got goals, things like that. And I think the problem with some small businesses and even large ones, to be honest, is they go to an agency and go, okay, it's like a tap. You pay an agency, bang, we're going to see the growth that we want. And it's not always the case because there's so much external things that could impact the business. And if you haven't been around long enough to see the ups and downs, to see trends, seasonal growth, things like that, going to an agency before you've experienced that is probably not the best idea. Because again, if something goes bad because you've got a seasonal product, you point the finger at the agency, but this could just be in the market. And again, if you've not been around long enough to know these ups and downs, these trends, it's one of those things that could be a problem. But there's definitely a point to go into an agency too early, in my opinion. But like Pete said, it goes down to the numbers and KPIs as well.
Your metrics can change, and what is important to your business can change so quickly. Like we've talked about, Google ads going down, or even Google changing the way that search engines work has changed a lot of people's businesses. Some people have lost businesses. So you also need to know a lot about your own business, and it, as agencies, whilst we strive for that excellent relationship, we want to know everything. We are sort of chopping and changing all the time as well. So we are moving on to different clients and whatever. So, if you lose, for example, we look at client satisfaction and client retention within an agency. That's part of what we do. And if we lose clients, all of a sudden the focus shifts to new business. Whereas new business is something that we look for all the time. We're always taking part in lead generation tactics and strategies and whatever. But then the focus shifts and whatever. And yes, you're flexible enough as a small business to do that, but you need to make sure that that the agency that you're working with is aware of this, that, and the other, and how, if something changes, what have you tried, what haven't you tried? We've talked about that as well. So, I mean, we have our own individual KPIs between teams and as wider business goals as well. So we can be quite quick to notice trends and issues and whatever. But I think relying on metrics and not being aware that change can happen rapidly is something that needs more focus.
100%. I mean, the classic things, in terms of what to do before spending money on marketing or is advisable, is obviously around your audience, who you were targeting, who's your target market, who's your perfect customer, all that kind of stuff. But one thing that I think is really important, and we're seeing this more and more, especially as we're going down. We work with a lot of e-commerce businesses, a lot of businesses that have products that have supply chains and production costs and stuff like that. What is how much are you prepared to pay for a customer or for a lead? What's your break-even point? So on and so forth. And if we've got that figure, and it's not an easy figure to get a lot of the time. A lot of the time, it does take some quite sophisticated number crunching to understand how much you're prepared to acquire a new customer or a new lead, and that's really important. And I know Lewis in particular in the paid advertising space, it's even more important there because that forms the basis of our strategy. We know if we're creeping up to success, if it goes over a certain figure, we never need to pull back, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean that's the knowing how much you want to pay for a lead or a customer is it's like probably the most important metric. And if you don't know that figure, it's not a bad thing necessarily. You might just be too early to understand how much you're willing to pay. So at that point, it's definitely avoid an agency simply because they can't really help you grow if you can't give them that number. But if you do know that number, then there you go, the door's open, right? But I think this really depends on niche. For example, if you're taking a supplement based product or someone in the health and beauty where it's pretend like really repeat purchases and lifetime value is the most amount of money you're going to make off that customer. The front end sale, you might break even or you might even slightly lose money. So it's like if you have a KPI and it's we need to be profitable on the first sale of a monthly subscription product, well, that might not be a reasonable goal. If you can break even on that first interaction with a new customer, that is a fantastic result because you've had enough business to know that roughly people stay for 3 months, 6 months, or whatever, and you can see where the future forecasted revenue is going to come from. That's such an important metric that not enough. All right, even honestly, larger businesses still don't actually know that figure. Like if you ask a lot of people, they wouldn't be able to give you it. Which I mean is a problem for a fully established business. But if you're just starting out and still trying to work that out, at least you're aware that
going
that
back
is
to what we
something you
talked
need
about at the
to
beginning, though, I suppose
establish.
that's a great advantage that small businesses have is that if they do have this information, they can communicate that with you very effectively, and you can communicate back to them without having to go through layers of management and who do I talk to and whatever. And I think you can have that much tighter relationship with an agency, if you've got a smaller team on some levels. So I think that's absolutely key. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, like I said, some established businesses don't know these numbers, so I'm going to use paid again. They're running paid. They don't really change budget. They have a set budget, whatever, and they feel like they're growing because their top line is improving. These newer, smaller businesses that understand these metrics, they know how much they can pay for a customer. They know like forecasted revenue. They can be so aggressive on their scaling if they know these numbers versus these bigger giants that they probably don't have enough insight really into like what the core metrics are and how much they could pay and what a new customer acquisition cost is and things like that because they get stuck on our top line revenue is growing but our new customers are falling. And that's why it doesn't happen often, but some of the smaller like newer companies grow really really rapid. And again, it's like a unicorn business, but it's because they understand all the fundamental numbers that equal business growth and success. So yeah, it's so important.
Cool. Well, before we wrap up and move on to the Room 301 challenge, is there anything that you guys want to add that would support a new business owner or somebody in the marketing function of a new business? Any golden takeaways?
I would say there's a lot of things you can control, especially as a smaller business that you have to learn. You have to learn what these things are and improve. And again, that could come back to getting the right staff, the right processes, understanding your products and whatever. But also, I would really embrace your authenticity and your ability to communicate with your users, your audience, really effectively. So listen to customer pain points. Try to resolve them, keep them happy, and whatever, and make sure your products and services exceed your customers' expectations where possible, and keep an eye on the market for trends and changes. You have the ability to be a little bit more agile and pivot and so on, but just make sure that any sort of growth or change or in process or staff or product or whatever is appropriate to your business and your growth aims. You can't try to do everything and compete on every single level.
I'll sort of back your point up actually about customer service, because I think it's a hard thing to keep in house, and it's often the first thing that like product based businesses outsource because it just gets too much. But I think if you can hold on to that as much as you can, you like you said, you'll really see the pain points, the struggles, the issues they've had when they've purchased from you, what things they've found good about your products, even if that's like looking at reviews or customer service emails or comments on your Facebook and Instagram and TikTok accounts and social media. Like that is such invaluable information that like you won't really pay too much attention to if you start to outsource this. So, in my personal opinion, hold on to that as long as you can until you are pulled every way, and then you have to let it go. But yeah, I do think there's invaluable stuff there from your customers that you just won't necessarily see when you get too big as a business.
Cool. Brilliant. Well, lots of good takeaways, and hopefully you guys listening, can take a lot away from that and understand that as a small business, there are plenty of advantages. It's not, it's not something to be scared of. There's stuff that you can do that a big business may necessarily not be able to do. So yes, lots of good stuff. So before we wrap up, we're going to do the Room 301 challenge. It's something we've newly introduced to Series 2. And if you don't know already, the 301 in our podcast name comes from an SEO term, a 301 redirect, which is actually a permanent redirect of one URL to another. It's sort of how SEO pros tell the search engines that the page is no longer available or it's moved and to look somewhere else instead. So we want to pose a thought experiment to our experts, in this case, Pete and Lewis. So Pete, Lewis, I'm going to start with you, Pete. If you could redirect one thing in digital marketing, so it ceases to exist.
I have been looking forward to this because I've heard the last few, and I've come up with about 50, and I had to whittle it down. I didn't want to come on here and say AI because it's too broad an answer, but I know that's what I was going to say. Maybe we should just not have touched on it whatsoever. No, AI can be extremely useful in loads of ways to make certain tasks easier, especially if you're on a budget, a smaller team, whatever. So I'm not going to go with AI as such, but I'm not going with ChatGPT or anything like that. But what I would go with is the people who use AI badly. I'd like to get rid of those people because AI isn't inherently bad. Machine learning isn't inherently bad. All these things are great. I mean, as an example, I'm a creative person. I started out my career as a designer and illustrator, and I really wish things like Midjourney didn't exist. If you don't know what Midjourney is, it's generative AI. So you put in, I want a picture of, whatever, and it'll come up with it. It'll draw it in any style you like and whatever. The problem is, it's everywhere now. It's been unleashed, and there's too many bad examples. There's too many articles that have just been written by ChatGPT. There's too many images online. You can't go on a stock image website now without being thrown a load of AI. And I can see it a mile off, or maybe I've got a trained eye, whatever. And I'm sure it'll get better. But it is everywhere, and it has had the effect of making the internet a poorer place, in my opinion. So, but it's not inherently bad. So I wouldn't put, I wouldn't put AI into Room 301, as it were. I would put the people that use it badly. I think there was a quote a while back, and I've written it down here, so I remember it. But it was like, we invented AI to help creative people perform mundane tasks, but instead we've helped mundane people create. So it's almost that anyone can do it, and it's not precious design gatekeeping, by the way. It's not like I only as a designer can use it artfully or whatever, but it's just that we have ended up with an internet is absolutely chock full of crap. And I think it was the infamous Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park that said, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think whether they should. So it's just that idea of like, yes, we can do it, but it doesn't mean you can just say, write article, there we go, done, bang it on the website, etc. It doesn't mean you can fill, your entire article with pictures created by Midjourney. It doesn't mean that we should, create a new album by the Beatles, just because we can, generatively create these things. It's more about using it for to help out with stuff like that. To use it in a way that enhances your own work or to perform the mundane tasks. So yeah, not AI, just the people that use it badly. There we go. I thought about that one, haven't I?
I did wonder why you were wearing a Jurassic Park t-shirt today.
It was, yeah, it was.
On purpose?
More about the show.
Okay, like it. Lewis, what are you getting rid of, mate?
A similar thing in terms of people about something. I'm staying in my niche, in my lane, the paid stuff. People that believe that turning on a paid ad campaign is the solution to all business problems. I wish it was like that, because my job would be super, super easy, but there's just so much externally on the back end that result in a successful campaign. And a lot of people, and I don't think this will ever stop, it's like, oh, can we just launch this campaign? It will get us so much revenue. It will get so many leads through the door. And it's just not the case. You know, there's creative, there's the landing page, the offer, the product or service itself, the reviews of the business, things like that, the reputation the company has, and things like that back up a paid ad campaign and really sort of boost it in terms of how profitable and how successful it can be. Not to say that it can't do that. It definitely can be a success. It's just, if these things are all in line, then you have a good person behind the paid account and a good strategy and structure, you're off to the races. But yeah, the people that think
just
just
don't
turning
like people,
we don't
like dealing with people. I think it's that automation, isn't it? It's that idea that you can just click a button and it'll do it for you magically, and everything will be fine, and it'll be totally 100% optimized, and but that the reality is not that.
Yeah.
I can't help but think that the people who use AI badly are also the same people that would think you can
shove them all in the room.
You're probably not wrong.
That's it. And I'm
the same people, different issue.
That is it. Well, look, I appreciate both of you guys. I appreciate both of you guys' time. Some really good insights today. And we've brought a group of people into Reba 301 that should never have to get out again. So that is it from us. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
Cheers.